Doctor, are you telling me my husband tried to falsify our baby's DNA test? Olivia Carter's voice trembled as she locked eyes with Dr. Vanessa Reynolds. The sterile white walls of the hospital office seemed to close in around her, the fluorescent lights casting an unforgiving glow over the documents laid out on the desk. Her fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair, knuckles whitening as her breath grew shallow. Dr. Reynolds exhaled slowly, her expression unreadable. Olivia. I've known you for years. I was there through every injection, every failed round of IVF, every tear you shed in this very hospital. I need you to listen to me carefully. She tapped her manicured nails against the paper in front of her, the crisp rustling of the document filling the thick silence. The test results were tampered with. Someone accessed the lab system, altered the data, and tried to make it look like the child you just gave birth to wasn't yours. The words slammed into Olivia like a physical blow. Her vision blurred, a wave of nausea rising in her throat. No. That's impossible. She clutched her baby boy closer to her chest, his tiny form warm against her. He stirred slightly, his little fingers curling instinctively around the fabric of her blouse. This child, this precious life she had fought so hard to bring into the world, how could anyone, let alone Ethan, try to erase him? Dr. Reynolds' voice was calm, but there was a cold fury beneath it. Olivia, someone went to great lengths to do this. And based on the evidence we've gathered, that someone was your husband. The room spun. Olivia sucked in a sharp breath, struggling to process what she had just heard. Ethan? The same man who had held her hand through every painful procedure, who had whispered reassurances into her ear on nights she thought she would never become a mother. The man who had painted murals in their nursery, carefully selecting pastel colors to suit their unborn child? No. This has to be a mistake. She tried to convince herself, but the look in Dr. Reynolds' eyes told her otherwise. The doctor leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. I need you to stay calm. I know this is overwhelming, but we are dealing with something serious here. This isn't just a matter of trust, Olivia. This is fraud. A crime. And if what we suspect is true, your husband didn't just want to cast doubt, he wanted to destroy you. The weight of those words settled heavily over Olivia. How did this happen? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Dr. Reynolds hesitated before speaking. Let's start from the beginning. And just like that, Olivia's mind was pulled back to the moment she thought her life was perfect, the moment when she still believed in the man who had vowed to love her forever. Charleston, South Carolina. A city of charm, history, and whispered secrets behind grand antebellum homes. For Olivia Carter, it was the place where she had built a life she thought was perfect, a life that, looking back now, was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. It had all seemed so blissful just a few months ago. She could still remember that Sunday morning in late March, when the sunlight streamed through the towering stained-glass windows of St. Michael's Church. The air carried the scent of freshly bloomed magnolias as she walked through the courtyard, her emerald green maternity dress hugging her 8 months pregnant belly. Olivia. You look radiant. A warm voice called out. She turned to see Mrs. Henderson, one of the church elders, approaching with a smile. Not long now, the older woman beamed. How are the baby preparations coming along? Olivia smiled, resting a gentle hand on her belly. Almost ready. Just a few last-minute touches in the nursery. Beside her, Ethan Carter stood tall, dressed in a tailored navy suit. His hand rested protectively on the small of her back as he chuckled, exuding the effortless charm that had once drawn her to him. She's being modest. I think we've single-handedly funded every baby store in Charleston at this point. A round of polite laughter followed, and Olivia let herself bask in the warmth of the moment. For 7 years, she had prayed for this child. 7 years of doctor's appointments, injections, disappointments, and heartbreak. And now, finally, she was on the cusp of everything she had ever wanted. As the congregation settled into the pews, the pastor's voice rang through the historic church. Let us bow our heads in prayer, for the blessing of new life. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Ethan's hand as he intertwined his fingers with hers. She had never felt more at peace. After the service, they dined at Charleston Grill, a tradition they had upheld for years. Ethan ordered the filet mignon, while Olivia opted for the chef's seafood special, teasing him about his predictable choices. Their conversation drifted to the upcoming birth, hospital bags, last-minute nursery adjustments, baby names. "I trust you completely," Ethan said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're going to be an incredible mother." His words made her eyes sting. She had no reason to doubt him then. The rest of the day had been picture-perfect. A stroll down King Street, where Ethan had spent 20 minutes debating over which stuffed animal would be their child's first. He had finally settled on a white rabbit, pressing it into her hands with a grin. "This one. It'll be his first friend." That night, Olivia sat in their bedroom, flipping through the pages of an old scrapbook. Each page held pieces of their journey, sonograms, hospital wristbands, photos of her holding up positive pregnancy tests with tear-streaked cheeks. Ethan had been there through it all. Hadn't he? She closed the album, pressing her palm against her belly. Please, let this happiness last. If only she had known what was coming. The night air in Charleston carried the faint scent of salt from the nearby harbor, a gentle breeze rustling the curtains of the open window. Olivia lay in bed, one hand resting on her belly, the rhythmic movement of her baby bringing her a quiet sense of comfort. Ethan lay beside her, scrolling through his phone, the dim glow illuminating his sharp features. She turned her head slightly, watching him. There had been something different about him lately, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. He had been working later than usual. Coming home exhausted, distracted. Some nights, he would step out onto the balcony for long phone calls, speaking in hushed tones. When she had asked, he had simply kissed her forehead and murmured, "Just work, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." And she had believed him. But that night, as she drifted into sleep, a strange thought crept into her mind. Why do I feel like something is slipping through my fingers? April 3rd, the night everything changed. It was still dark when Olivia woke to a sharp, sudden pain radiating from her lower abdomen. She gasped, gripping the sheets as another wave of pain hit her. A quick glance at the clock, 3:15 a.m. "Ethan," she whispered, nudging him urgently. "Ethan, wake up." He groaned, blinking groggily before registering the distress in her face. His drowsiness vanished in an instant. "Liv, what is it?" I think it's time." Within minutes, Ethan was fully dressed, grabbing the hospital bag they had packed days ago. His movements were smooth, efficient, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 100 times. The drive to Charleston Memorial Hospital was eerily quiet. The city, usually buzzing with tourists and nightlife, lay still under the moon's glow. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched. "How far apart are they?" he asked, eyes flicking to her in the passenger seat. 5 minutes, Olivia breathed, inhaling through the pain. "It's happening fast." "You're doing great," he reassured her, though his voice lacked warmth. She wanted to believe him. As they pulled up to the hospital entrance, nurses rushed to her side, helping her into a wheelchair. Dr. Vanessa Reynolds was already waiting for them, a familiar presence in a moment of overwhelming intensity. "You've done well, Olivia," she said, checking her vitals. "Let's get you settled. It won't be long now." Through the haze of contractions, Olivia registered the details around her. The soft lighting of the private suite. The scent of antiseptic mingling with fresh linens. The rhythmic beeping of monitors tracking both her and the baby's vitals. Ethan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the Charleston skyline. She barely had time to process the unease creeping up her spine before another contraction hit, tearing through her. "Focus, Olivia. You're about to meet your son." The hours blurred together, an exhausting cycle of pain and breathing, encouragement and determination. Margaret, her mother, arrived at dawn, placing a bundle of prayer cards from the church into Olivia's trembling hands. Everyone's praying for you, sweetheart, Margaret whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand. Olivia could only nod, her body too tired for words. By mid-morning, it was time. Ethan held her hand, tightly, almost painfully, as Dr. Reynolds gave the final command. One more push, Olivia. You're almost there. With a final cry of effort, the pressure released, and then a baby's wail filled the room. Tears streamed down Olivia's cheeks as her son was placed on her chest, his tiny body warm against her skin. She could feel his heartbeat, fast and steady, as she whispered, "My baby, my beautiful baby." The moment was perfect. Sacred. Until Ethan shattered it. "I need a DNA test. Right now." Silence. The nurses froze. Margaret let out a sharp gasp. Dr. Reynolds narrowed her eyes, her lips pressing into a thin line. Olivia, still holding her newborn, barely registered the words at first. Then, as if in slow motion, she turned her head toward Ethan. He was staring at the baby. But not with love. Not with awe. With cold, calculating suspicion. A chill spread through Olivia's veins. What did you just say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "I want to confirm that this child is mine." The world around Olivia crumbled. The room turned deathly silent. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic beeping of the monitor and the faint cries of the newborn nestled against Olivia's chest. The warmth she had felt just moments ago, the overwhelming joy of holding her son for the first time, was now swallowed by a cold, creeping horror. She blinked, certain she had misheard. "What did you just say?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Ethan didn't flinch. His expression was unreadable, his eyes locked onto the tiny infant in her arms. "I want a DNA test. I need to confirm that this child is mine." The words landed like a slap. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, her fingers instinctively tightening around her baby. Margaret, standing beside the bed, let out a sharp, incredulous gasp. "Ethan, have you lost your damn mind?" Her voice trembled with rage. "You're questioning your own child? After everything Olivia has been through?" Ethan didn't acknowledge her. He didn't move. He just stood there, eerily calm, waiting. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward, her professional demeanor barely concealing the ice in her voice. "Mr. Carter, I understand that emotions run high after childbirth, but this is neither the time nor the place for this discussion." Olivia turned back to Ethan, searching his face for something, anything, that could explain this. A misunderstanding. A cruel joke. Some kind of stress-induced paranoia. But there was nothing. The man who had once kissed away her tears after every failed pregnancy test, who had painted the nursery walls by hand, who had promised her they would finally be a family, was now looking at her as if she were a stranger. Her lips parted, but no words came. Ethan exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. "I'm not asking," he said quietly. "I'm demanding it." The betrayal sank into Olivia's bones, heavy and suffocating. She could feel her mother's hand gripping her shoulder, steadying her, but it did little to stop the tremors racking through her body. The baby, sensing the tension, whimpered softly, his tiny face scrunching up in discomfort. Olivia instinctively rocked him, her protective instincts roaring to life. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. She swallowed hard, her throat burning. "You're accusing me of something, aren't you?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The realization hit her like ice water. He wasn't just asking for a test. He wasn't just doubting. He had already made up his mind. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. This wasn't some impulsive request. This had been planned. Her mind raced, grasping for anything that could explain why, after 7 years of heartbreak, after watching her body break down under the strain of fertility treatments, after finally getting the miracle they had prayed for, he would look at their son and see a question mark instead of a blessing. Unless, he wanted to see something else. Her stomach twisted. Dr. Reynolds, still holding the lab chart in her hands, exhaled sharply. Fine. If that's what you want, we'll run the test. But Olivia and the baby need rest. You'll get your results when they're ready, not a second before. For the first time, Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing at his sides. A flicker of something, annoyance? Frustration, passed through his expression, but he quickly masked it. Of course, he said smoothly, slipping his hands into his pockets. I'll wait. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. As soon as the door clicked shut, Olivia's composure shattered. A sob clawed its way up her throat, but she bit it back, holding her baby closer as if she could shield him from whatever storm was brewing outside these hospital walls. Margaret knelt beside her, cupping her face with gentle hands. Sweetheart, listen to me, she whispered fiercely. I don't know what's going on, but I will get to the bottom of this. Dr. Reynolds placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. We'll take care of the test. But Olivia, something about this isn't right. Olivia knew that. She just didn't know how wrong it truly was. The sterile white walls of the hospital room felt colder now, the warmth that had once filled the space replaced by a suffocating sense of unease. Olivia clutched her newborn son to her chest, pressing her lips against his soft forehead. He had only been in this world for a few hours, and already, he was at the center of something sinister. Margaret stood by the window, arms crossed tightly, her face twisted with fury. That man has lost his damn mind, she muttered under her breath. A DNA test? After everything you've been through? Olivia swallowed hard, her throat raw. She could still hear Ethan's voice in her head, cold and unwavering. I need to confirm that this child is mine. None of it made sense. Dr. Reynolds, ever composed, flipped through the paperwork in her hands. I've already sent the sample to the lab, she said. We'll have results in a few days. A few days. The words sank like lead in Olivia's stomach. She had expected these first moments of motherhood to be filled with happiness, with exhausted laughter, with Ethan's arms wrapped around her as they marveled at the tiny life they had created together. Instead, she was waiting for a test to confirm what should have been unquestionable. The baby stirred against her, his tiny fingers curling against her hospital gown. Olivia forced herself to take a slow breath. And you're sure, she said softly, there's no mistake? The test will show that he's. Dr. Reynolds' gaze softened. Olivia, I was there through every step of this pregnancy. There is no doubt in my mind. And yet, Ethan had planted that doubt anyway. Margaret turned from the window, her expression dark. You need to prepare yourself, she said quietly. For what? Margaret hesitated, then met her daughter's gaze. For the possibility that Ethan already knows what the test will say. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. What are you saying? She whispered. I'm saying that this isn't about him wanting to know the truth, Margaret said. This is about him controlling the truth. The words settled heavily between them. Dr. Reynolds hesitated before speaking. Olivia, if there's anything you haven't told me about Ethan, now is the time. Olivia shook her head, her pulse racing. No. He was perfect. He was always perfect. Supportive, loving. He wanted this baby just as much as I did. Dr. Reynolds didn't look convinced. Margaret let out a slow breath. Then tell me, Liv. When did he stop acting like it? The question sent a shiver through her. She hadn't thought about it before, not really. But now, as she sat in that hospital bed, the weight of her mother's words pressing down on her, flashes of the past few months began piecing themselves together. The late nights at work. The sudden distractions. The way he had pulled away just enough for her to notice but not enough for her to question. And then, the way he had looked at their son. Not with awe. Not with love. With calculation. Olivia's grip tightened around her baby. Something was very, very wrong. The hospital room felt like a prison. Olivia barely noticed the soft hum of monitors or the occasional footsteps in the hallway. Her thoughts were trapped in a cycle of disbelief, anger, and something far worse, fear. Ethan knew. The way he had stood there, so unnervingly calm, so prepared, told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment doubt. This wasn't shock. This was premeditated. And the terrifying part? She had no idea why. Margaret sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes sharp with suspicion. "You need to be careful, Olivia." Olivia looked down at her baby, gently rocking him as he slept. "Careful of what?" Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Of what he's planning." A fresh wave of nausea washed over her. What he's planning. Ethan had always been a calculated man, meticulous in everything he did. His business deals, his public image, his place in Charleston's elite. Nothing was left to chance. So why would he suddenly demand a DNA test unless he already had a plan in place? A plan that required making her look like the villain. Olivia's blood ran cold. Dr. Reynolds, who had remained quiet, exhaled slowly. "I don't want to alarm you, but I did some digging." Margaret straightened in her seat. "Digging?" Dr. Reynolds placed a tablet on the bedside table and pulled up a document. "A lab report. This is a copy of the original DNA test before it was processed," she explained. "The one I personally verified before it went through the hospital system." Olivia's pulse quickened. "And?" Dr. Reynolds swiped her finger across the screen, revealing another set of data. "This is what was sent back to me after the test was completed." Margaret leaned in, eyes narrowing. Even without medical expertise, it was obvious, the two results didn't match. "What the hell?" Margaret whispered. Olivia's grip on her son tightened. "You're saying, someone changed the results?" Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Yes. And it wasn't a mistake." The weight of the moment settled over them, thick and suffocating. Margaret was the first to speak. "Then that means..." "Someone tampered with the test before Ethan ever saw it," Dr. Reynolds finished. A deafening silence followed. Olivia felt her breath hitch. "But why?" Dr. Reynolds hesitated, then met her gaze. "I think Ethan already knew the baby was his." Margaret let out a bitter laugh. "That son of a, he knew, and he still put Olivia through this?" Dr. Reynolds' expression darkened. "He didn't just put her through this. He made sure there would be evidence that could be used against her." Olivia's heart pounded. "Against me?" Margaret inhaled sharply. "Oh, God." Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I don't think Ethan wanted to prove the baby isn't his. I think he wanted to frame you for cheating." The world tilted. Olivia felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her fingers dug into the hospital blanket, knuckles white. No. No, this wasn't happening. This wasn't just doubt. This wasn't paranoia. This was an attack. Ethan had set her up. He had planned this. He had walked into that delivery room, knowing exactly what he was doing, with the full intention of destroying her. Her voice came out hoarse. "Why would he do this to me?" Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for Olivia's. "Because if the DNA test said the baby wasn't his, you'd be accused of infidelity." Olivia's stomach churned. "He'd have the perfect reason to divorce you," Dr. Reynolds added. "And with infidelity on your record? He'd take everything. The house, the money, full custody of the baby." Olivia felt like she was going to be sick. Margaret's face twisted with rage. "That bastard, he was never planning to stay, was he?" Dr. Reynolds' jaw tightened. "No. He was planning an exit strategy." Olivia's mind reeled. 7 years. 7 years of love, of struggle, of heartbreak and healing. Had any of it been real? Had Ethan ever truly wanted this family? Or had he always planned to walk away? Margaret's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "We have to fight back." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "And we start by exposing the truth." A new resolve settled over Olivia. Her fear didn't vanish, but it shifted. If Ethan thought she would just sit back and let him destroy her, he had made a fatal mistake. He wanted war? She would give him hell. The weight of the revelation pressed down on Olivia's chest like a boulder. Ethan had orchestrated all of this. He had walked into that delivery room with a plan, not a doubt. And if Dr. Reynolds hadn't caught the tampered results, he would have succeeded. Her fingers curled into fists. He wanted her to look like the villain. He wanted to take everything from her. Margaret's voice was sharp with fury. So what do we do now? Dr. Reynolds didn't hesitate. First, we report this to hospital security. The system logs will show who accessed the test results. If we can prove that the data was altered, we'll have something solid. Olivia swallowed hard, her grip tightening around her baby. And Ethan? Margaret's expression darkened. We hit him before he hits you. Dr. Reynolds nodded. If Ethan thought he could control this, we need to take that control away from him. Olivia, you need to be careful. The moment he realizes the truth isn't on his side, he'll find another way to twist it. A shiver ran through Olivia's spine. She had spent years trusting this man, believing in him. She had pictured him in every milestone of their son's life, his first steps, his first words, school drop-offs, family vacations. Now, the thought of Ethan holding their child made her sick. Margaret straightened. I'll call our lawyer. Olivia's stomach churned. But I don't have any evidence yet. Margaret's eyes were steely. We will. Dr. Reynolds tapped her tablet, pulling up the system logs. I'll start here. If someone accessed these results, there will be a digital footprint. Margaret turned back to Olivia, her voice firm. And you need to act like you don't know anything. If Ethan suspects you're onto him, he'll cover his tracks. Olivia exhaled shakily. Pretend like I don't know? Pretend like I'm still the trusting wife? The thought made her want to scream, but she forced herself to nod. Okay. She looked down at her baby, sleeping peacefully in her arms. He had no idea what was happening around him, no idea that his father had already tried to erase him. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to his soft cheek. I won't let him take you from me. Margaret squeezed her shoulder. You're stronger than him, Olivia. He underestimates you. Maybe he did. And maybe that would be his greatest mistake. 48 hours later. Olivia sat on the edge of the hospital bed, trying to steady her nerves as Dr. Reynolds stepped into the room, a folder clutched in her hands. She knew before the doctor even spoke. The results are in. Margaret, sitting beside her, exhaled sharply. And? Dr. Reynolds' expression was grim. The baby is biologically Ethan's. There was never a question about that. A bitter laugh bubbled in Olivia's throat. Of course there wasn't. Because this was never about doubt. This was about control. Dr. Reynolds continued, flipping open the folder. But that's not the most important part. She turned the folder around, showing a screen capture of the hospital's system logs. Here's where the test results were first processed. And here, she tapped lower on the page, is where someone accessed the system in the middle of the night. Olivia leaned forward, her breath catching. Who? Dr. Reynolds' gaze sharpened. A male figure was seen entering the lab around 11:30 p.m., the night after the test was submitted. The security footage isn't the clearest, but we ran the logs. The system was accessed from an external source. Margaret tensed. An external source? Dr. Reynolds nodded. The login came from a device registered to Ethan Carter's company. The room fell into silence. Olivia felt her pulse pounding in her ears. So, he didn't just want the results changed. He personally made sure it happened. Dr. Reynolds exhaled. We also have testimony from one of our lab technicians, Ryan Delgado. He reported that someone approached him 2 days before the test was processed, offering him $500,000 in cash to ensure a certain outcome. Margaret's jaw clenched. And let me guess, he refused? Dr. Reynolds nodded. And after that, he started receiving anonymous threats. Olivia gritted her teeth. Ethan wouldn't have stopped at threats. If Ryan had taken the money, he would have had leverage over him. But because he didn't, Margaret finished for her. Ethan had to break into the system himself. A cold, burning rage settled in Olivia's chest. This wasn't just betrayal. This was criminal. Dr. Reynolds met her gaze. Olivia, this isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is fraud, data manipulation, and attempted coercion. Margaret leaned forward. So what's our next move? Dr. Reynolds closed the folder. We call the police. Olivia's breath hitched. This was it. The moment everything would come crashing down for Ethan. A part of her, the part that had once loved him, wanted to hesitate. Wanted to believe there was another explanation, another way. But then she looked down at her son, innocent, vulnerable, and already targeted by his own father. No. She met Dr. Reynolds' gaze and nodded. Do it. Dr. Reynolds picked up the phone. The battle had begun. Ethan Carter sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room of Charleston Police Department, his polished demeanor still intact despite the circumstances. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across his face as he casually adjusted the cuffs of his tailored shirt. He didn't look worried. If anything, he looked annoyed. Detective Hannah Pierce watched him from across the stainless steel table, her fingers drumming lightly against the case file in front of her. She had interrogated dozens of high-profile men like him, corporate elites who thought their wealth made them untouchable. But Ethan Carter was different. He wasn't just arrogant. He was calculating. She leaned forward. Let's go over this again. Where were you between 11:30 p.m. and 12 a.m. the night after your son was born? Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose, feigning boredom. At home. Sleeping. Hannah raised an eyebrow and slowly slid a photograph across the table. It was a security camera still from Charleston Memorial Hospital, grainy, but unmistakable. A tall man in a dark suit, his posture stiff, his face partially obscured. She tilted her head. That's funny, because this looks a lot like you. For the first time, Ethan's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for Hannah to catch it. He recovered quickly, offering a smooth, indifferent shrug. Coincidence. Lots of men wear suits. Hannah smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Sure. But not every man has access to the hospital's internal system. She pulled out another document, a digital log of unauthorized access. This, right here, traces back to a device registered to your company's server. Care to explain? Ethan's jaw tensed. He opened his mouth, but before he could formulate another lie, the door behind Hannah swung open. Another officer stepped inside, and behind him was Lauren Mitchell. Ethan stiffened. His lips barely parted as he muttered, "What the hell are you doing here?" Lauren didn't look at him. She was dressed sharply, but her usual confidence had been replaced with something else, resignation. She crossed her arms and turned to Hannah. I have something to say. Ethan's entire body went rigid. Hannah gestured to the chair beside him. Go ahead, Ms. Mitchell. Lauren sat down, finally meeting Ethan's eyes. For the first time since walking in, she spoke directly to him. I told them everything, Ethan. Silence. The color drained from his face. You, what? Lauren's voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. I told them how you instructed me to contact Ryan Delgado. How you offered $500,000 to make sure the DNA test results were falsified. How you planned to make Olivia look like a cheater so you wouldn't have to pay her a dime when you divorced her. Ethan's fingers twitched, his control slipping. You're lying. Lauren let out a hollow laugh. Am I? Because last time I checked, I have all the emails. The ones where you told me exactly what to say to Ryan. The ones where you promised me a fresh start once all of this was over. She shook her head. I should have known better. But I won't go down for you, Ethan. Hannah leaned back in her chair, her smirk growing. Well, well. That's quite the confession. Ethan turned to Lauren, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You don't know what you've just done. Lauren met his gaze, unflinching. I saved myself. Ethan exhaled sharply, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The evidence was overwhelming, the betrayal complete. Hannah closed the case file with a soft thud. Ethan Carter, you are under arrest for fraud, falsification of medical records, bribery, and obstruction of justice. 2 officers moved in, grabbing his arms and forcing him to his feet. He didn't fight, but his knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists. You don't know who you're messing with, he hissed at Hannah. She smirked. No, Carter. You don't. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Ethan finally understood. He had lost. The cold steel of the handcuffs pressed against Ethan's wrists as the officers led him out of the interrogation room. His once perfect composure had cracked, the weight of reality sinking in. The hallway outside buzzed with activity, officers moving about, phones ringing, papers shuffling, but to Ethan, it all blurred into the background. His mind was spinning, calculating, looking for a way out. There had to be a way out. As they passed the observation window, he caught a glimpse of himself in the reflection. The powerful, untouchable businessman he had always been? Gone. In his place stood a man whose carefully laid plans had just collapsed. He was shoved into a holding room, the officer stepping away as Detective Hannah Pierce followed in after them. She leaned casually against the metal table, arms crossed, watching him like a predator that had already won. You know, she said, her voice almost amused, I've dealt with a lot of men like you, Carter. Smart. Wealthy. Think they're always a step ahead. She tilted her head. But you made one crucial mistake. Ethan forced himself to meet her eyes. And what's that? Hannah smirked. You underestimated your wife. The words landed heavier than he expected. For years, Olivia had been the perfect partner, loyal, trusting, believing in him without question. She had never doubted him, never once suspected what he was capable of. That had been his greatest advantage. And now, it was the very thing that had destroyed him. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. An officer stepped inside, handing Hannah a document. She skimmed it, then let out a satisfied sigh. Well, she said, tossing the paper onto the table, looks like you've got more problems than you thought. Ethan narrowed his eyes but said nothing. That's a warrant, she continued. Your bank records. Offshore accounts. The $5 million you tried to move out of the country? Yeah, that didn't go unnoticed. She gave him a mockingly sympathetic look. Divorce courts don't tend to like it when a husband tries to hide assets before serving his wife with false adultery claims. Ethan's jaw clenched. And let's not forget the bribery charges. She flipped the document over, tapping a highlighted section. Ryan Delgado's statement, along with the security footage, proves you attempted to falsify medical records. That's a federal offense. He inhaled slowly through his nose, his mind scrambling. This couldn't be happening. He had planned everything perfectly. He had made sure there were no loose ends. Except for Lauren. His gaze flickered toward the door. She was out there somewhere, free, walking away from this unscathed. He had trusted her. He had given her everything she asked for. And in the end, she had betrayed him faster than Olivia ever could have. One last thing, Hannah said, straightening. Since you were so worried about proving paternity. She slid another document toward him. Here's the final DNA test. Turns out, you are the father. Ethan didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. For the first time, the reality of what he had done hit him completely. He hadn't just tried to frame Olivia. He had tried to erase his own child. Hannah studied him for a moment, then shrugged. I gotta say, Carter, for a man who wanted to control everything, you sure lost control of this." With that, she knocked on the door, signaling the officers. Ethan barely registered the click of the cuffs tightening before he was pulled to his feet. As they led him down the hallway, the world outside moved on without him. His name would be all over the news by morning. His career? Ruined. His money? Seized. His life? Destroyed. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter had no power. 2 years later. The warm spring air drifted through Olivia Carter's backyard, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms. The sun cast golden light over the neatly kept garden, where a 2-year-old boy giggled as he ran through the grass, his tiny feet kicking up soft tufts of earth. "Matthew, slow down, sweetheart," Olivia called from the veranda, laughing as her son ignored her and dashed toward the flower beds. He was happy. Carefree. Unburdened by the past. Olivia leaned back in her chair, sipping her tea as she watched him. The past 2 years had been a journey, healing, rebuilding, rediscovering herself. It hadn't been easy. There had been court battles, media scandals, endless questions. But in the end, she had won. Ethan was serving a 10-year sentence. His company had cut all ties with him, his name had been dragged through every newspaper in Charleston, and he had nothing left. Lauren had disappeared, rumors said she had moved to Miami, starting over somewhere far away from the mess she had helped create. And Olivia? She was finally free. Margaret stepped onto the veranda, a knowing smile on her lips. "He's got your stubbornness, you know." Olivia smirked. "God help me." Matthew stumbled, then picked himself up with a determined little huff. Olivia's heart swelled. She had been afraid once. Afraid that Ethan had taken too much from her, that she wouldn't be able to rebuild. But sitting here, watching her son, she knew the truth. She hadn't lost anything. Ethan had. She set down her cup and stood, stepping into the sunlight as Matthew ran toward her, his arms outstretched. She lifted him easily, spinning him around as his laughter filled the air. For the first time in years, she felt light. She pressed a kiss to her son's forehead, then whispered, "You tried to destroy me, Ethan. But in the end, you only destroyed yourself." The wind rustled through the trees, the scent of spring thick in the air. And with that, Olivia Carter walked forward, never looking back.